So you're early. You're early. Hi, hi. Yay. There's not much people here yet, but welcome to those who are here already. I'm gonna be. Let's. I choked. Oh, wait. ちょっと待って。ちょっと。Wait. Hi, Spike Bees. Hi. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Welcome. Should we wait for more people? Or should we just go ahead? The spoopy. Which Maddie is so good? Hi, Lolly King. Hi. Yeah. You see which Maddie? Which Maddie? Is the art is by oh no, I hit her. The art is by Dasu. I commissioned her to draw Witch Maddie. Thick. I look so thick there. Yes, Dasu's art is so good. Yeah, I watched Dasu draw that. Yeah, I wasn't home. I wasn't home when Dasu streamed that, and she told me that she will be streaming that as well. So I was like, I told her that, well, I'm going out, so I won't be able to see the stream, but it's okay. So the surprise factor is still there. I tried so hard not to peek during her stream because I want to be surprised on how the art will look like once I get it. But yeah, look at it, it's so pretty. Okay, there's people now already. So let's start with the spoopy stories. Do you know Corpse Husband? Corpse Husband. We're gonna be listening to Corpse Husband videos for the spoopy story. Because, the vibes, his voice. It's so good, it's perfect. So yeah, let's go. Today is 1K day. Let's see. Let's see, Panda. Let's see. Yeah.
Hey everyone. Just a friendly reminder that my channel is primarily ran on stories submitted from my viewers to
Tell
my
me
email.
if the audio is
There's
fine,
been an
okay?
extreme lack of stories that I can use recently, and it has contributed to my upload schedule being
Hi,
what it
Diana.
is. Whilst my health is a big problem and it does contribute to that, I can't upload without good stories. If you have a good story that you think could be usable on my channel, please email your story to corpsehstories@gmail.com. With the subject of the email being what kind of story it is, and also include somewhere in the email what alias you'd like to be credited under. I own time. Welcome, and I'm really happy to have you here.
I fast
That being
forwarded
said,
it
you
a
have 3 of
bit.
the most upvoted Let's Not Meet stories
It's
from
a bit
me.
low. Maybe it's just yours. I think it's high enough. It's high volume in mine. Wait.
I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and me and my childhood friend Joe were outside all the time we could manage it. Joe lived on a farm that bordered a pretty big forest, and my parents would drop me off in the morning and we'd stay in the woods all
I can
weekend.
do more stuff, but I will
We'd basically only come out for school. We loved pretending we were frontiersmen. We'd build shelters, traps, practice making fire with sticks, the whole 9 yards. When we got to be in high school, we got this notion to pull a Stand By Me. This was based on the movie of the same name that had just come out. The idea was that we'd walk the railroad tracks out in the country, but instead of looking for a dead body, we'd find cool bridges to fish from and camp a little ways off the tracks. Of course, we knew this was dangerous and we'd likely be trespassing, but we were kids. We had a lot of fun. We did find beautiful rivers, we discovered bridges no one went to, we fished, we hid from trains. At night, we camped in woods just near the tracks and made small hidden fires. Nothing bad ever happened. It was idyllic. In fact, it was so fun we did it multiple times, never had a problem. After high school, me and Joe went our own ways.
For other people, is the audio okay?
Always tried to coordinate visits
aside from Prelance?
Well, one summer in the mid-90s, it worked out that we were both in town for about a week. We'd do stuff with family in the day, and at night we'd either catch drinks at the bar or sit outside Joe's house around a fire and talk about the good old days. One night, me and Joe got to talking about our Stand By Me trips. Well, nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix. and soon we decided to take a day, walk the trails, camp one night, and walk home. The day came and we started out early morning. We had my wife drop us off in our old spot where we used to start, right outside of our hometown. She thought this was absolutely crazy and made sure to mention it. When she pulled away, Joe suggested that instead of walking the usual route, we take the opposite direction
if you
just
know
to be adventurous.
Corpse Husband,
I mean, we knew the land well and we had a map, so
YouTuber
I
that
gave a
specializes
what the
in
hell and off we set.
horror scary.
The day went fine.
Horror stories.
It was fun and
that's
a
Corpse.
little sad, but
Corpse
in a good
Husband.
way. We found a bridge, sat on the edge, smoked a joint, and moved on.
Let me try.
We had no fishing gear, but we brought some canned food and other stuff. Before night started to set in, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick forested area with trees on every side of the train tracks, so you felt like you were in a tunnel. We had brought small hammocks to sleep on, but before we set them up, we decided to do a little scouting of the perimeter. Now, this is what we used to do in the old days, too. We'd walk the area around a little bit just to make sure some dude's house wasn't just over a hill and we weren't actually camping in their yard. We walked maybe 100 feet or so into the woods and up a small incline. We figured if we didn't see anything from on top of this short hill that we'd be fine. But when we got to the top, we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. It was barely visible. We pondered over what to do. We both assumed it was a sugar shack or something because there didn't appear to be a clear road into it. From where we were, there didn't look to be anyone in it either. All was quiet.
Horror story
no
podcast.
Could be
yeah,
seen.
We're listening
No
to Corpse's
We decided to walk
YouTube
a little
videos.
closer just to make sure. We came down the hill very slowly, and as we neared the building, we saw it wasn't a sugar shack at all. It was an old church. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was a squat, sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from years of moss and rot. A cross still stood on top of the place, also weathered black. None of the windows had glass, and there were no doors, just open doorways. We got close enough to see inside.
Welcome, everyone.
There were rows of pews and a built-up section in front for a preacher to stand. We didn't go all the way in. I mean, we didn't want to. Beyond all that, there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no paths, no roads. It was an abandoned church. We left immediately and went back up the hill to our spot we had picked to camp. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still a little uneasy. We chalked it up to the natural creepiness seeing a church in the middle of the woods would elicit. Besides, at this point it was dusk and we just decided to rig up our hammocks, go to sleep, and move on at early morning. Night set in, and as we lay in our hammocks and shot the shit, we began to hear something in the direction of the church. Our conversation about it went a little like this. Do you hear that? The hell is that? It sounds like people singing. And it did sound just like singing. We both slid right out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two and the singing continued, but it wasn't getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill and see if we could spy where the sound was coming from. We could still move very quietly in the woods from the old days. I mean, it was second nature to us. The moon was barely out, but it provided enough light so you wouldn't walk right into a tree. But it was near pitch black. We didn't use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we didn't talk. When we got to the top, we saw light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together and had a hushed conversation that boiled down to, can you believe this shit? The light looked to be candlelight from the way it flickered. And though we tried, we couldn't make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer either. We had about a football field length between us, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit, and then it just stopped. After that, a very loud male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the hell out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you see in movies. But again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because we couldn't understand a single word. Eventually, it got to where the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and And then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that I covered my ears. Then it stopped. At this point, I was just getting ready to say, let's get the hell out of here, when Joe put a hand on my shoulder and hissed, "They're coming out." We were far enough away that we couldn't make them out really well, but what we could see was a line of figures walk out the open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights. They began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move toward us and the hill. We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our shit, and ran to the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had came from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically, like whoever was holding them was shaking them. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights and came to a road. By our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down it, and we walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife to come get us. My wife and other friends all just thought it was some kids messing around, but I heard those voices, and they sure as hell didn't sound like kids to me.
Should I put it somewhere?
I'm not sure
should I
who those
not?
people were, but it was definitely the creepiest
What are
thing
you
that
doing
happened to
at
me
the
out in the
moment?
woods.
Emote. A new emote for subs. New emote.
I'll start by saying I have a terrible biological father. He's been a shady person all my life and constantly caused me a lot of grief. This is just one of those examples. When I was 4, my parents split up. My mother and I moved states, and they agreed I would visit my dad every school holiday for a week. This one particular time, I had been with him for a few days when I was playing with my cousin at a nearby park. A car pulled up, and I recognized the man as one of my dad's friends. He called me over, and without thinking, I ran over to him and left my cousin at the park. He asked me if I could show him where my dad lived, and I agreed and got in his car.
Yes,
I gave directions and didn't notice at all that they weren't following them correctly.
So you can
Looking
show
back,
me
I didn't
your
completely really know the way anyhow. After way too long, I did realize that we were getting closer to the city, which is far from my dad's house. We pulled up at a house I didn't recognize, and the man told me to wait in the car. So I did. At this point, I didn't feel scared at all for some reason. He eventually took me inside, and I definitely started to feel unsafe then. I mainly remember 2 girls passed out with their tops off, and a much older man was feeling them up everywhere. I made eye contact with this man, and he made me sick to my stomach. I had definitely figured out that this was a bad situation by this point. A lady took me into a bedroom and brought me a sandwich. The bread was stale and I wasn't hungry, but I ate it all because I felt bad for her, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what I was thinking about. The lady told me a lot of things I didn't understand, but when she left, I remember thinking my dad was coming to pick me up soon, and I fell asleep, waiting for him. I wet the bed that night, and no one came to see me the next day until I cried very loudly and banged on the door. The lady came back and yelled at me for stinking up her bedroom, and I asked about my dad. She said he was coming tonight after he finished work. She didn't offer me a shower or a bath, so I sat in my soiled pants all day. After that, everything turned into a blur, really. My dad didn't come that night, and I was so terrified. In my head, I felt like I was there for months. I thought I was missing school and everyone had forgotten about me. In reality, I was there for 5 days. They let me take 1 shower. I don't remember eating much except for boring sandwiches, and I had chips and gravy maybe once. Finally, my mom drove across the country to come and get me. After not being able to get a hold of me or my dad for so long, and then me missing my pre-booked flight home, she panicked and came looking for me. Thank God she did. She found my dad at his girlfriend's house, methed out, completely hiding out. Turns out, he owed a lot of drug money to the people who had taken me. They had told him that they had me, but he couldn't afford it or didn't want me back, whatever it was. He didn't bother to try to get me back.
What a shitty dad.
My amazing mom paid his debt for him after borrowing from a lot of people, and she came to get me back. I remember when someone came into that room and told me my mom was there, and I walked out and I could smell her. It was the best feeling to feel safe again. She took me home, and I didn't see my dad again for a long time. She never called the police.
Nope, I'm
My
not.
parents' relationship was very complicated then, and I fully understand the choices she made. Anyways,
like a normal
I'm definitely
tablet.
okay now. I've spoken about this in therapy, and I've come to terms with most of the things that I went through as a child. But still, a very messed up situation for a 4-year-old girl to have to be in. So to my dad's friend, the sandwich lady, and even to my dad himself, I hope I never meet you again.
Also, did you notice that I'm not using the
A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs.
I can frown.
It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and also having nice neighbors close enough to not feel isolated. The area had no street lights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only with my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around that house. I didn't see anyone nearby,
let me pause
so I just ignored it and went inside.
Wait, I'm just pausing it a bit. So yeah, I forgot to actually introduce my Halloween week. I have a schedule just for this week. For Halloween, in preparation for Halloween. Wait, I'll link the. I put the link of my schedule in the chat, and like tonight is just a warm up for this week, so we're just gonna chill with Corpse's voice and him telling us scary stories while I draw an emote for my subs. But yeah, if you're curious about my schedule for this week, please do check out the link that I sent in the chat box. It's gonna be a fun week, spoopy week. Okay, I'm continuing with. Okay.
I had just got off a shift with a few hours overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and just call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. But he would always text me to let me know beforehand though. And I hadn't heard my phone go off.
It's set already.
I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone's screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9 something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened the door and stepped inside. The house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one I was in and a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both locked, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me just enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in a corner. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic just a foot or so away from the access so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from about their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. That scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me.
I'll give you the context.
That was the noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet.
Wait, let me...
I couldn't find
let
my
me
cell
just
phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs.
Wait.
The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped. All the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell, though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, along with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said people often use to smoke meth, so they think he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with family or friends that night and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at the house, though. I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of my bed, going to my closet, and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved, except now I go to a crawl space at the back of the closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting into the attic, or if he hadn't gone into the bathroom at the end of the hall first.
Okay. Let me...
Thanks for watching.
Oh, that was the last story for that video. Okay. Leon 1103. I'm doing a Halloween special week this week in preparation for Halloween on Saturday. And the link that Freelance gave you is a link for my schedule in Twitter. Like today is just like a warm up for this week, and I'm just drawing an emote while me and chat are listening to corpses scary stories, spooky stories. Basically that's it. We're just warming up for this week. Like kinda like chill, but with chilling with pressure. Pressure? Yeah. Kind of like chilling, but instead of lo-fi music, you listen to scary stuff and corpses talking to you, like more please. Harry P9990, thanks for the follow. Thank you. I'm the only one who doesn't really do Halloween stuff. It's okay. I'm gonna be playing the horror game, so you guys don't have to. Okay, let's play this.
Hey everyone, in the past 2 months I haven't uploaded. I got a gun pulled on me.
Okay.
And you guys have been subscribers on YouTube. The people on those on Twitter.
I'm skipping. Sorry, okay, there it is.
I'm a male and was about 21 at the time this happened. I was working at a restaurant as a manager. I had worked from 6 p.m. the previous night. We did stock take after our shift ended, which involved the owners locking 3 people in the restaurant overnight to count and log all the stock in the kitchen, and letting them out the next morning because nobody else had keys to the place. I was supposed to go home after the shift ended, and another manager would do the stock take, but she had an emergency, and seeing as the owners insisted a manager had to be present, I got stuck with working from 6 p.m. to about 8 a.m. the next morning when I was relieved by the next manager. I was pretty bummed, but the owners agreed to pay me overtime and give me an extra day off. They also left us steaks and fries to eat. I only left the restaurant at about 9 a.m. the next morning. The owners were there sooner, but I spent time talking shit and chatting with my friend who was the manager for that morning shift. I was walking to the bus stop as I didn't have a car yet and was saving up for one, and I was exhausted. I had gotten a bit of sleep in after the stock take while we waited for the owners, but it was on a bench at a booth and not very comfortable. I'm usually a very vigilant person, and the neighborhood I had to walk through was pretty sketchy, but usually only at night. And at this point, I could barely keep my eyes open, and my biggest worry was falling asleep on the bus and missing my stop.
I like the vibes.
I was about 4 blocks from the restaurant, and the bus stop was in sight when I saw a man rapidly approaching me from across the street. He was wearing old, washed-out jeans, a shirt that I presume used to be white but was now a yellowish-brown, and an old baseball cap with the logo torn off. I immediately thought he was either going to ask me for money to buy drugs or to offer to sell me drugs. That was just the type of area this was. Before I could open my mouth to tell him I wasn't interested, he went into this whole tirade about how he's a delivery truck driver and that he needed help offloading a large delivery because he was working alone that day and that he would pay me. I told him no thank you and that I'm not interested. I'm tired and that I want to go home. I started towards the bus stop again, but he kept pace with me, pleading the whole time. Please, man, I need your help. If I don't get this delivery done ASAP, my boss is going to kill me. I kept telling him no, I wasn't interested. When I finally reached the bus stop, there was another man standing there, and the delivery guy seemed to lose interest in me mid-sentence and tried to sell his story to the other guy. The guy at the bus stop was a well-dressed black man, and I was waiting for him to tell the driver to get lost. So imagine my surprise when he seemed interested in the whole thing. He walked away with the driver and they were talking just out of earshot. Whatever, not my problem anymore. Then the well-dressed guy turned back and walked towards me. He said, "Hey, listen, man. This guy really needs help and he's willing to pay.
Oh my God.
He says the place is just around the corner, but this is a dodgy neighborhood, and I'm not sure I could trust him. Could you please come with me? He says we can get $100 each for less than an hour's work. If he's lying, he can't take both of us on. And if he's telling the truth, it's an easy $100. Now, when I heard $100 for less than an hour's work, I was interested. Don't judge me, I really needed the money because I was saving up for a car so I wouldn't have to take the bus every day or rely on friends for a ride.
Damn, yeah.
Also, this other guy was with me now, so I'll be okay if the driver tries anything funny, right?
Soma!
At least, that's what my tired brain said. How wrong I was. So we returned to the driver and told him we would do it. If the fact that there were two of us now put him off, he didn't show it, which did even more to put my mind at ease. As we started walking, I asked the guy, "So, 100 each, right? Why so much for so little work?"
Thank you.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a team to help me, and my boss gave me the money to pay them after the job was done, but they bailed last minute. Now I really need to get this delivery done and my boss is on my case. So I decided, seeing as I have the cash, I'll get volunteers to help me and pay them instead. But there's two of us. Why would you have money for a team if just two people can do it in under an hour? The man kind of stuttered a bit before finally saying, "Oh, you know what these contractor companies are like." I didn't know, but decided to just keep my mouth shut and focus on getting myself physically ready for more work, even though I was exhausted. Like I said, I really needed the money for a car. The well-dressed man remained quiet the whole walk, and I assumed he was just suspicious and trying to stay alert. "We're here," the driver said. Here was an old car dealer that looked closed between two run-down empty buildings. "They look closed," I said stupidly. "The delivery area is open," the driver replied quickly. "Security here is very strict. You'll need to show me everything you have on you and give it to me so security can check it in." The driver laughed. The well-dressed man handed over his wallet and phone while I stared dumbstruck. The driver quickly disappeared in a small alley between the dealership and one of the buildings. It was cluttered with junk, so you couldn't see very far inside of it. He was to go round back to security. I was baffled. How can this man give his valuables to a complete stranger just like that? The same man who told me he didn't trust this situation and asked me to come along to make sure it's all okay. Not even a minute later, the driver came back and handed back the man's valuables. Then he looked at me. "Your turn," was all he said with a smile. "Look, I'm sorry, but no, I can't do that," I said, as both of them stared at me intently while my mind was still trying to process the situation. Oh, you don't trust me? Is that it? Even after I brought back all of his stuff? The driver chuckled while motioning to the other guy, who also chuckled. What are we delivering here anyway? I asked, desperately trying to buy time while my mind tried to figure out what exactly was happening here. The driver's smile disappeared as I could see the question caught him off guard. Fire extinguishers. Before I could reply, he changed the subject again. If you don't trust me, that's fine. Come with me and show them to security yourself. His smile was back on his face, but his eyes were not smiling. I was already uncomfortable, but this was it. There was no way I was going to walk with this guy I didn't know down that dingy alley behind the building where nobody could see us. I looked at the well-dressed man, and he just smiled and said, "Do it.
I'll answer after.
No,
I do
I'm
have
sorry,
some
I'm out,"
scary
I said, trying to walk away.
Experiences.
The driver grabbed my arm firmly, his smile gone now. "Just come with me, it will just take a minute." He almost growled while the other guy stepped closer, but didn't move to help me. At this point, my tiredness was completely gone and my brain was in overdrive. Now, I'm tall, I'm 6'4", but I'm slim. Fit, but very slim, and with my height, it gives me a very lanky appearance, not intimidating at all. Besides, I highly doubted I could take both of them at once, especially with them so close to me. I was in full fight or flight though, so I did what I usually do when I can't intimidate someone with my physical appearance. I intimidate them by making them think I'm batshit crazy and unstable. Nobody wants to fight a crazy person from my experience. I screamed, "Don't you touch me," at them, and in doing so, I basically screeched at them. This worked and completely caught them off guard, and I saw them hesitate. I yanked my arm from his grip and started spouting curses and obscenities, trying my best to act like a deranged madman. Then I bolted mid-sentence before they knew what was going on. They made no move to follow me or call after me. When I looked back, both of their faces were expressionless and cold, just staring at me. When I slowed and glanced back again to make sure they weren't following, they were still standing there, staring at me with those same expressions. Except now 3 other men had come out of the alley the driver wanted me to walk into. None of them looked like security guards, and they all just stared at me with those same cold, blank faces, completely still like statues. I've had a lot of time to reflect on this incident in the years since, and in hindsight, I realized red flags should have gone up a lot sooner. Those men were hiding in the cluttered alley waiting for me, and the well-dressed man was in on it, to make me feel more safe and comfortable because I had someone with me. Some people have told me I overreacted and it was all innocent, but I saw that man's face when he grabbed my arm. It was pure evil. Also, no car dealership of that size has a lot of fire extinguishers, especially not enough to warrant 3 people offloading them. A delivery like that would take 10 minutes tops for just one person. Anyways, I did get my car eventually. She's my pride and joy. I quit that job not long after, and I never went to the police. My thoughts were I had nothing to give them except descriptions of the driver and well-dressed man, but I had no proof that any crime was committed. And even if they did catch the guys, they couldn't charge them with anything. I realize now they could have asked the dealership if there was CCTV or something, but even if they were just in jail overnight, that would be a night they couldn't hurt anyone. I might have saved someone from being mugged, or even worse by doing that. Honestly, that part still haunts me. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say.
Oh, wait. Okay. Let me. Since I have been asked, wait. Let me hear something. Ah. Uh. Well, Vanilla Flavor asked, since this is about scary stories, have you experienced any scary situations before, Maddie? Yes, I did, actually. Well, I'm gonna be speaking as sinful, okay? I'm gonna be speaking as sinful. Sinful, used to be like a very scaredy cat. And because of that, I think, personally speaking, I think if you're like get scared a lot, like spooky creatures will flock to you more. That's what I think. That's what I think. But it might be wrong, but that's what I think. And yeah, since Sinful used to be like a scaredy cat, she used to like experience. Oh shit! Wait. Oh wait, I messed up. She used to experience like scary shit in her house, from her house. I mean, within her house. That like, but now not really. She's not scared anymore. But yeah, that happened like years ago. To be honest, years ago. Sinful and her best friend, uh, was in their bedroom. There were both girls, and like Sinful was texting, and her best friend was playing with Sinful's dog. Uh, then the dog didn't like there. The dog has a bed underneath our bed, like the human bed and dog bed under. And then the dog suddenly didn't want to go out, so Sinful's best friend pulled the dog bed from underneath the bed, so she can continue playing with Sinful's dog. But then once she pulled the dog bed out, someone pinched her like pinched her really bad. I don't know. Really hard. Pinched her really hard, and she slapped Sinful like on her legs. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Why did you pinch me? Like something like that. But of course, they didn't say what the fuck. They were still like kids and stuff, you know. But yeah, she accused Sinful of pinching her, but it wasn't Sinful. No. I'm Sinful was not the one who experienced the pinch, but we were both there, and who else would pinch her, right? So we we looked at each other like shit. We gotta go, and we bolted out of the room. Like fuck. Oh yeah, that's a very short one, but I do have one more. It's a short one as well, but it happens to Sinful herself. By the way, context for those who doesn't understand the Sinful and Maddie thing. Sinful is the creator of Maddie. Maddie's mama. The creator of Maddie, the artist behind, the person behind, but they are separate. They are separate people. Maddie is the VTuber. Sinful is the mama of Maddie. Okay? Okay. Just wanted to get that out. So yeah. Sinful is like on her bed alone, scrolling Facebook or something like that. Just normal stuff. This was years ago. Okay, this was years ago. She was still very scaredy cat, so she was approached by a lot of supernatural folks. Then someone someone whispered behind her, like literally behind her ear, whispered her name. Like shit, sends down shivers to her. Like thinking about it now, it's still super fucking scary, but I'm not afraid of them anymore. So yeah. What else? I can't remember anything else. Oh wait. One more. Um, this time it was like broad daylight. Sinful and her friends, like childhood friends, were all outside the house, and but the door to the living room is open. And do you know like the doll that prays? The I forgot the name, but a doll that prays when you put her hands together. Yeah, Sinful used to have that doll. Then the doll was on a table, and the table can be seen like right. We were right. Sinful and her friends were right in front of the door to the living room. In the living room, there's the table. Then there's the doll. Then one person said, "Did you see the doll move?" Then we were like, "No, we were talking, so of course we can't see." You know, then they were like, "No, it moved." Then we like, since there was like shit that happened already before at Sinful's house. It's not really surprising anymore that supernatural fox keeps on pestering us. So yeah. Then we stared at it for like a few minutes. Then it started praying, even though we didn't touch it or anything. And it can only pray when the hands are together. When you put her hands together, it can only pray. So we're like, fuck shit, fuck this shit. Ah, okay, that's it. that's all it. Sinful managed to get rid of her ghost sphere, and she's not afraid anymore. Sinful likes, oh fuck, Sinful likes horror movies, except for one movie, and I'm not gonna tell you what that movie is. Never seen a praying doll. I forgot, but it was like it trended before. Uh, it's not Baby Alive, but it was a oh wait, hydrate really. let me drink first. It wasn't a Baby Alive, but it was a praying doll. I forgot the name. Every doll has a name, right? Like every toy doll has a name, and I forgot what the name is. Too bad. But yeah, shit started praying where we're like, we're already out, but fuck this shit, we're still out. Like, I didn't return home until like my parents. I mean, Sinful didn't return home until her parents came home. She stayed in, she stayed in her friend's house. Yeah, I forgot, but yeah, the doll is like in Lolita, in a Lolita dress. Then the doll was also it's blonde and curly, like usual doll looks, you know. So yeah, that was very spooky as a child, but I don't think I'll be spooked anymore if that happened again. Like, fuck you, mind your own goddamn business. I'm working here. So yeah, that's all. That's all. I don't have any more scary story. Since yeah, like as I said, my Billy. Oh fuck! The music was so loud in my ears. Yeah. Like I said, my Billy is like, if you're not scared anymore, they won't go after you anymore. Yeah. So you should face your fears, guys. You should face your fears. If you're not afraid, they won't come after you. Let's continue, corpse.
I'm a woman who currently lives in the downtown area of a generally very safe city. Since the start of the pandemic, I've been laid off from my job at the bookstore and have been staying inside. However, my micro apartment is about the size of a prison cell. It's only large enough to fit a bed, toilet, sink, and a tiny shower, so I have to go outside to exercise for my mental health. The night before last, I'd taken my bike out at 2 a.m. to cruise around. Knowing what happens next, going out at that hour was a stupid choice, but my sleep schedule is non-existent and 1 to 4 a.m. are my most active hours. I assure you though that I'm not going to be going outside at those hours for a very long while. I'm new to biking, being that nobody taught me how to ride them as a kid, so the complete lack of cars or any human life at all is helpful in terms of practicing. Like if I swerve, there are no children to knock over. Anyways, I had been cycling about the city for about half an hour, not having any specific destination, just kind of winding around the street blocks. It's surreal and eerie to see a main street completely empty when, before the pandemic, it had been covered with noisy cars at all hours of the night. When I got to the outdoor mall and plaza area, I decided to rest on a bench and scroll on my phone for a bit. About 5 minutes into my break, I start to hear what sounds like distant humming. It was many blocks away, so at first I thought it was my noise-accustomed city brain compensating for the silence. But as the sound grew clearer, I became aware that it was undeniably real. I didn't really think anything about it, and I didn't even look up until the person who was humming was only a few buildings away from me. My eyes had to adjust off the brightness of my screen to see a shadowy figure walking on the other side of the street. It was only until he walked into the light of a closed shop that I could make out any details. It was a pale man wearing a very tight all-black outfit that looked like a morph suit but without the head. He was humming a tune that I wasn't familiar with. His face was strangely froggish. This is when I began to get a little nervous. I grew up in a city with a high homelessness rate, so I was used to seeing addicts act unusually because I knew that 99% of the time they're harmless. But this man didn't look homeless at all, and his eyes weren't leaving me. I politely divert my gaze, hoping he'll do the same. But when I look up a few seconds later, I see that he not only failed to break eye contact, but he was now crossing the street directly towards me. I pretended to be unbothered, scrolling on my phone, not letting onto the fact that I was tracking him in my peripheral vision. What the hell was he wearing a morph suit for? He stopped in front of the bench I was on and stopped humming. "It's late," he said. A slow fear began boiling in my stomach. He wasn't saying it in a way that a concerned parent would. He was smiling and his hands were clasped behind his back. Yup," I replied very uncomfortably, fretting about the fact that I hadn't got on my bike and taken off before he was able to even start talking to me. What happened to social distancing anyways? I pretended to check the time on my phone and said, "Oh, it is late. I should be going." He stood there motionlessly as I picked my bike up off the ground and tucked my phone away. I glanced up at him. His weird smile had melted away and he looked like a toddler whose toy had just been stolen. "Go where?" he said. I didn't want to stay there any longer, so I mounted the bike and took off without answering. Now this is the detail where I'm a new bike rider comes in, because I didn't realize that tires being low on air was a thing. I know, stupid. And my bike doesn't go very fast. Only a little faster than a person can run. So I took off onto the road hoping to leave him behind. But to my dismay, from behind me the sound of shoes slamming against the pavement starts up. This guy is running after my bike. I begin to pedal as fast as I can. "Go where? Go where? Go where?" he was chanting. My heart was pounding ridiculously fast at this point, and I was thinking about what the hell to do. I looked for any signs of other people, but it seemed to be just us, some closed stores and hotels with completely empty parking lots. I sped through red lights, knowing that I would just have to bike long enough to lose him. I was hoping that someone in the apartments above would hear this man chanting, look out their window and maybe call the police for me, hoping that a car would come up from behind us and force him to stop running after me in the middle of the street. His chanting is getting a little farther away, but it's not far enough for me to lose him. There's no way I could stop at my apartment, lock up my bike, unlock the door, and get to safety without him being able to catch up to me. Then it hit me that about 10 blocks away from where I was a police station. Would anyone even be there? I didn't have any other ideas, so I passed the turn to my apartment and began pedaling to the station. My thighs were burning at this point because a bike with no air in the tires does pretty much none of the work for you. My stomach starts sinking as slowly, the sound of soles on pavement and the sickening chanting of "Go where" became steadily closer. I realize I'm slowing down even though my blood is pure adrenaline. I felt like crying. "To the police station!" I screamed back at him in hysterics as I continued to push forward. To my absolute surprise, the night goes silent. Not even the sound of his feet chasing after me, just my empty tires scraping on the pavement. I pedal forward a few more blocks before slowing to a stop and looking back over my shoulder. He was just standing there in the shadowed street. I wasn't going to give him the opportunity to catch his breath. I pedaled as hard as I could, diverting from the police station and taking a separate path to get back to my apartment, stopping every now and then to listen for the sound of shoes against pavement or the humming of a lunatic. When I get off my bike at my apartment building, I feel like I can't unlock the lobby door fast enough with my shaking hands. My head is spinning and I can feel my cheeks are flushed. I lock up my bike in my garage and go up to my apartment to collapse on my bed. I didn't even think about calling the cops at that point. I was just thankful that I hadn't been followed home. I seldom sleep well, but that day I couldn't sleep at all. This has not left my mind these past 2 days. And when I went out to jog this morning, I found myself constantly glancing around for a morph suit and my ears straining automatically, trying to catch the sound of faraway humming. I don't know what would have happened if he caught up to me, but I'm so glad that I didn't have to find out. This kind of stuff literally never happens to me, and this is easily the creepiest thing that's ever occurred in my life. I swear when you're listening to these horror stories on YouTube, they seem separate from your reality, a part of another person's life that could never happen to you. At least, that's how I felt until this happened. The 2 things I learned: 1, don't go out alone at night in a completely empty city, and 2, buy a damn tire pump. Okay, so backstory. I go to a high school with about 500 people. This happened during my sophomore year, and I'm a junior now. This might not be as extreme as other Let's Not Meet posts, but this is something that still terrifies me even a year later. Mark had other issues before this happened. He started cutting his arms in class. I was sitting 2 seats away from him and watched it all happen. He ended up being reported to the office and was sent to the YOC for about a month, if I remember correctly. The YOC is the Youth Opportunity Center. It's basically a mental hospital / juvie center for kids. He came back and he seemed fine. He said he was never suicidal and that he only did it for attention, which made sense for him because of his kind of messed up childhood. On the day everything happened, I had no clue about anything. But during my 6th hour class, the school resource officer appeared at the door of the classroom. One of my friends was standing behind him. The SRO told my teacher that he needed me immediately. I had no clue what was going on. I just thought I was being randomly drug tested, as it's pretty common in my school. I tried asking why we were going to the office and I got no response. He took the 2 of us into the conference room where 2 police officers were standing. They questioned me first. As I walked into the room, he shut and locked the door behind me. One of the police officers blocked the door, the other blocked the window. I was petrified. I had no clue what was happening. The conversation went as follows. Side note, the SRO was confrontational and aggressive throughout this entire conversation. Have you heard anything today? About what? There were threats made against our school. Your name came up in a conversation. What do you mean my name came up in a conversation? I haven't heard anything. Who made the threats? And who said I would know anything about it? Mark made the threats. When we questioned some other people, your name popped up. They said you might know something. Who said my name? We can't tell you. I understand that they probably couldn't tell me who said it due to confidentiality reasons, but it's so frustrating to be locked in a room with 3 police officers who are acting like you've done something wrong, especially when you haven't. To this day, I still have no clue who mentioned my name. I tell them I have heard nothing. The only class I have with him is 5th period, and he wasn't there today. We don't talk outside of that class, and the only reason we talk in that class is because we sit at the same table, so we have to work together some days. Are you sure? I'm positive. I don't know anything. All of this is news to me. Okay, you're free to go. They opened my door, took my friend in, and I went back to class. I was kind of in shock. As soon as I walked through my class door, everyone was bombarding me with questions about what had happened. I ignored them and put my head down for the rest of class. Later that night, I saw on Facebook that the school had posted a message. I don't remember what it was exactly due to it being deleted. From my recollection, it said something like this. Parents and students of my school. 2 students reported that another student had made threats against our school. We have handled the situation and there's nothing to worry about. The actual post was longer, but I honestly don't remember it. I told my parents about everything that had happened that day, and they immediately wanted more information. I couldn't give it to them. At that point, I didn't know about the hit list or his arrest. All I knew was that someone had threatened to shoot up the school. The next day, everything hit the fan. I found out he had told people about his plans during 1st hour, and he was taken out of class and arrested during 4th hour. He was going to do it during 5th hour, start with the class he was in, which I was in too, and then he would head to the cafeteria. God, I still get chills when I think of this very moment. During lunch, my best friend came up to me and told me about the hit list Mark wrote and showed her during 1st hour. She didn't get the chance to tell me the day before. The other guy who was there confirmed everything. I was on it. I was the third name down. Evidently, he described in detail how he would kill me. Luckily, someone stopped it from happening, or else I would be dead before I even got to graduate high school. To this day, I still don't know why he would have possibly wanted to kill me. I barely even spoke to the guy. I was polite in class if I had to work with him. We had no negative interactions. So I honestly have no clue what I did to make him so desperately want me dead. As I understand it, he did have a gun in his locker. It wasn't a joke like his friends thought. He intended to do it. I was relieved that I was alive and that nothing happened, but I was also out of mind with horror at the thought of someone plotting my death. About 2 weeks later, my dad and I go into the Dollar General in our town. Keep in mind, my dad has no clue what Mark looks like. We walk in to buy something for dinner, and I see Mark. He's staring at me so intensely that I wanted to run out of the store, but I stuck close to my dad and told him to hurry. He looked at me confused, and I told him I would explain it later. Mark was following us around the store. I couldn't breathe. I don't even have the words to describe how scared I was. My dad and I got what we needed, left the store, and got in the truck. As soon as I was in the truck and the doors were locked, my dad turned to me and asked, "Who was that?" I replied that it was Mark. At this point, we were thoroughly panicked, not only because he was roaming free, but because he knew where I lived. I mean, we had security cameras, but knowing that a person who has adamantly expressed his desire to kill you knows where you live is terrifying. The school has since acted like this never happened. In fact, one of the administrators told me and my family we were overreacting when we wanted to know if he'd be back at the school because, according to them, I was never in any real danger. Luckily, the kid is no longer at my school, and he's currently in some type of jail because he murdered his mother. He pushed her down some stairs and she was found dead in a body bag. Thankfully, he was caught, and I don't think he's going to be getting out anytime soon.
Hi. Hi. Oh. It's finished. It's finished. Oh, this.
Okay, so this happened when I was around 9 years old. I'm 25 now.
Oh shit, wait. No. That's the same one. Here.
Hey everyone. Before we get into the video, I'd like to thank Audible for sponsoring this video. Them doing so really helps me financially pay for stuff like more videos and my medical podcasts, comedy, wellness programs, emotional.com/corpsehusband. Big thank you to Audible, and let's get into the stories. To provide context, I'm a registered nurse in a small to mid-sized rural emergency department. I've been doing this job for about 4 years, and one of the biggest problems we've had in my time here has been the prevalence of drug abuse and mental illness. I don't live in a tiny rinky-dink town, nor do I live in a huge metropolitan area, but imagine more of a middle ground city and otherwise a highly rural area of farmlands and aforementioned rinky-dink towns. Given the size of my city, we deal with a lot of substance abuse and subsequent mental illness. The majority of cases we see are meth-induced. This is the PSA in my story where I say, please, for the love of God, for your own sake and the people you love, do not do meth under any circumstances. It will absolutely and irreparably mess your life up in so many ways. One thing that many people don't realize is that hard drug use can lead to mental illness. A lot of the times, however, it's a chicken and egg scenario regarding whether the person had mental illness prior to the drug use or whether it was the cause. On this night, one of our local EMS crews was called for a person having a drug-induced psychosis. He was brought into our psychiatric holding area, being escorted by both the EMS crew and our local police officers. One glance at this guy and I could tell he was legitimately having a psychosis. He was in his mid-40s to mid-50s, had unkempt gray hair, unshaven, tattered and dirty clothes. Imagine a movie's portrayal of the crazy homeless man archetype, and he fit the profile well. In typical psychosis fashion, he was extremely paranoid and was verbally hostile towards staff in fear of what he was perceiving as a threat against his life. Everyone was patient with him, and we were trying to de-escalate him without having to physically restrain him for his and our safety. But it was becoming apparent that we wouldn't be able to simply calm him down verbally. I talked to the doctor and we agreed to give him a shot of an antipsychotic. I drew it up into a syringe and headed back to the psych area. I entered the room and there were still a lot of people in there with him. We had a couple of our ER staff, at least one of our hospital security, and at least 3 or 4 police officers just trying to keep this guy together. Admittedly, he was doing slightly better than when I had left him a few minutes ago. The shouting was at a minimum now, and it looked like all he needed was the shot to help him relax. I approached him with the syringe and told him I would be giving him a shot, and obviously, he became paranoid because, again, he was perceiving us as trying to harm him. After a little more calming him down, I prepared to give him the shot in his right shoulder. I lifted up his t-shirt sleeve, cleaned the site, and grabbed the muscle while he was talking to one of the police officers. I told him that I was going to stick him and gave him the customary 1, 2, 3 countdown as I stuck the needle into his shoulder. A quick explanation of my shot-giving technique is necessary before moving ahead. When I give a shot, I hold the syringe by the barrel like you would hold a dart before throwing it, between my thumb and index finger with the needle pointing towards the patient, obviously. After the needle is in, I make a split-second move where I rotate my hand so that the barrel of the syringe is between my index and middle fingers, much like you would hold a cigarette. From there, my thumb is free to push the plunger and administer the medication. Anyway, shortly after I stick the needle in this guy, he apparently forgot that I would be sticking him despite my warning not seconds before. He proceeded to freak out at the worst possible time. He turned to look at his arm, clearly alarmed by the syringe poking out of him. At this point, I was getting ready to switch my grip on the syringe from the dart grip to the cigarette grip, but his reaction to getting stuck caused him to pull away from me just as my grip was changing. He leaned to his left and the syringe stayed in his arm as he moved away. From there, he pulled the syringe and still attached needle from his arm with his left hand, raised it, and went after me with it as a weapon. The officers reacted by this point and start to go for the guy to stop him. I heard one of them shout needle, which I assume was the police way of calling out the weapon present in the room. As they're subduing him, his momentum continued towards me. Still shocked, I tried my best to get out of the way, but still felt an impact as something hit my left thigh. The syringe and needle fell to the floor and I saw that the needle was bent. By now, almost everyone in the room was on the patient, who was now screaming at the top of his lungs as staff worked to restrain him to the bed. I reached for the needle and syringe simply to get it out of the way for everyone else and to make sure that everyone had everything they needed during the restraint. At this point, I began to realize exactly what had happened and that I had been attacked. Oh God, please don't tell me that needle hit me. I was terrified thinking of what diseases and nasty shit this guy potentially had that I was exposed to. While contemplating my future.
Wait, let me just say that. I hate needles. I'm cringing.
Life with HIV and hepatitis, I stepped into the bathroom to inspect the damage to my leg. I was so relieved when I found my leg was unscathed. The only explanation I can think of is that somehow the needle hit the pack of gum that was in my left pocket at the time. Wrigley, if you ever need a spokesperson, please have your people get in contact with my people. After the situation had resolved, one of the police officers approached me and asked if I wanted to press charges against the guy. I initially said no because I felt sorry for the guy. He had psychiatric problems, he can't control what he's doing. As that shift progressed, however, my feelings began to change. Why should I protect this guy because he was methed out of his mind and attacked me? Why should I let this guy get away with giving me anxiety and making me feel uneasy for the rest of my career with psych patients? I later called the officer back and pressed charges against the patient. As of about 2 years ago, nothing has come of the charges because the patient wasn't in his right mind. Again, please, for everyone's sake, don't do meth.
Welcome to everyone.
This next story is from the same person, so consider it a continuation. After a couple of years of career development, I found myself in a leadership role in the ER. I had been given the title of night shift charge nurse over my department and my confidence was high. I finally had the opportunity to show everyone my leadership skills and how well I could run the department. I truly thought I could make a difference. On this night, one of our ambulances got called for a car versus semi collision. The patient was the driver of the car and was in his 30s or 40s. The medics in the ambulance mentioned that the collision may have been intentional as a suicide attempt. There was no obvious injuries that I noted when he first arrived, and he appeared to be calm. When I saw that the situation was under control, I stepped back and looked over the rest of the department. I didn't hear anything about him for the rest of the time that he was there. I don't remember why, but he was going to be admitted to the hospital. So the nurse called report to the floor, and we arranged for transport to his room upstairs. Because he could have possibly attempted suicide, he was placed in a 1-to-1 watch while he was in the ER, so the tech that was doing the watch was going to take him upstairs. Additionally, because he was a 1-to-1 watch, they needed to be escorted by a security guard. According to the tech, he had been asleep for quite some time prior to his transport. The security guard arrived and the tech woke the patient up for the transport. Once he woke up, all hell broke loose. He immediately got up from the bed and began talking nonsense, eventually escalating to yelling nonsense. With my workstation being right outside the room, I got up and went straight into the room. When I entered through the curtain, I saw the tech and the security guard standing opposite of the guy trying to talk him down. At this point, the guy was standing in the middle of the room, bare-ass naked, and had ripped out his IV. His posturing was threatening, and things looked like it would get violent unless the situation diffused. The security guard immediately called for backup and calmly tried to approach the patient. It was at this point that the guy attacked the guard by punching him in the face. The patient continued to go after the guard, but the guard managed to get him pinned against some cabinets in the room. I stepped up to try to hold the patient's arms back. I yelled for the secretary at the nurse's station to call the police.
But thank you.
Not long afterward, the other security guard arrived and tried to help. To paint a better picture, the patient is standing with his back against a counter in some cabinets, still yelling nonsensically in his psychotic tangent. Security guard 1 is
totally
bear hugging him around his chest and abdomen, much like a football tackle. I'm standing by the patient's side between him and the door, doing my best to hold his arms back from hitting anybody else. Enter the second guard, who approached the patient from the front and was trying to see what he could do to help. He unfortunately got too close, and the patient saw an opportunity. He cocked his head back in a split second and headbutted the second guard in the face with full force. The patient's head struck the guard right above his brow, which immediately split open and began dripping blood. That loud, dull thud of bare skull-on-skull contact is a sickening sound that I will never forget. Immediately following that, we got the patient's feet out from under him and brought him down to the floor. The security guard with his head gashed open was still trying to help us and was dripping blood all over the floor and the patient. By this time, other people had heard the commotion and came to help. The secretary had called 911 and we were just waiting on the police to get there. All we had to do was keep this guy held down. Granted, this was about an average-sized guy, but he was still quite the fighter. We simply were unable to hold him down on the ground by his limbs, so I ended up kneeling with my entire weight onto his back to keep him down. Again, my entire 250-pound frame was kneeling with my entire weight on this guy's back and was barely phasing him. He kept shouting for his little buddy to come save him so that they could run away to Alaska or something like that. When I think back on the situation, it was honestly kinda sad. This guy was clearly having a psychotic episode and didn't intentionally try to harm us. But in that moment, all I felt was rage. White, hot, boiling rage for what he did to my coworkers and friends. If I knew there wouldn't be any repercussions for my actions, I can't say that I wouldn't have beaten the absolute piss out of the guy in the moment. After the police arrived, we were able to get the patient restrained to the bed and sedated him without any issue. Once the situation was more under control, we registered both of the security guards for treatment. The first guard had no injuries and the other guard had his wound stitched up. Other than the wound on his head and being slightly dazed, he was fine. No one else was injured during the event. Shortly after I walked out of the room, the gravity of what had just happened hit me really hard. I quickly made my way to an empty room and closed the door before I absolutely lost it. I sobbed as silently as I could as I contemplated what had just happened. This guy had just gone full-blown apeshit on us and there was absolutely nothing I could do. I was the leader of these people, and they were put into a dangerous situation in what is supposed to be one of the safest places in the community. One of my responsibilities was to keep things under control, and I had just messed that up in a major way. Maybe I wasn't as capable of doing this job as I thought. I took a few minutes to let my emotions run their course and collected myself before heading back out to finish the shift. Not long after that incident, I stepped down from being a charge nurse, both for reasons related and unrelated to these events. I've since gone back to being a regular staff nurse in the ER, and I honestly prefer that. I haven't gone back to the charge nurse role again and most likely never will. I still get anxious before every shift I work, always worrying about what dangerous situation my coworkers and I may face in the ensuing 12-hour shift. I'm a night shift nurse who has been working at a veterans hospital for the past 3 years. My unit is located at the basement of the hospital. I chose to do 12-hour night shifts because it was quiet and relaxing for the most part before the rush begins in the morning after we leave. Last night, I was sitting at the nurses' station at 12:30 a.m. catching up on The Walking Dead, and I had the urge to use the restroom. I go into the restroom, do my business, and everything seemed completely normal. This restroom is a unisex restroom, so the entire staff uses it. As I process to head to the sink to wash my hands and kind of stare at my face in the mirror to see if I look tired enough yet, I hear a slow sliding sound coming from one of the ceiling tiles above. It moves open, exposing the roofing, and just sits there. Now, I'm not the bravest person in the world, but since my curiosity hasn't killed me yet, I decided to hide behind the wall that divided the main sink from the stalls and just wait quietly to see what was going on up there. In the midst of this silence, a man's legs began creeping out from the roof opening. This is when I knew I had to officially run. I was practically shitting bricks at this point. He drops into the restroom as I'm flinging the door open and screaming bloody murder into the hallway of sleeping patients. He grabs the back of my scrubs and we both fall to the floor. My coworkers, who most definitely got startled as hell, ran to my rescue. They separated us, thank God. However, I had a faint scratch on my right cheek. He had a pair of wound care scissors in his hand. Security was called as my male coworkers detained him. I was in a state of hysteria and was ready to go home in the middle of the shift. It turned out the young man was a newly admitted psych patient who was trying to escape from the upper hospital floors. Apparently, his family forcefully brought him to the emergency room, and they were waiting for him to get cleared to go to psych. No one is completely sure how he could get away and end up in the restroom ceiling. The freaking restroom ceiling. Currently, my nursing supervisor and I have decided to switch me to work morning shifts now, but on a different unit. Unfortunately, after this event, now I really know what authentic fear feels like. I was a new CNA at the local hospital and I worked the night shift. I was excited to have the job I worked so hard for, and I would volunteer for any task no one else wanted. I mainly did the crap job so that I would get to do the more medical-related tasks or assist the nurses with their skilled duties. I made friends fast, and because I was so easy to work with and so eager to help, I was one of only a few CNAs that was allowed to work in the ICU. This night, I was in ICU and we only had a few patients who were either heavily sedated or were in a coma, so this made it a pretty quiet night on the unit. A couple of hours into my shift, an old man passed away. We can call him Mr. Smith. And after the family left, I went in, cleaned, dressed, bagged, and escorted him to the morgue. The rest of the night was calm. However, we all made mention throughout the night of a creepy or eerie feeling in the air. I had the feeling as if someone was watching me, and I even had goosebumps. At around 3:30 in the morning, all the call lights above the door started to flash, but there was no sound. Then, as fast as it started, it just stopped. The ICU staff was all sitting at the nurse's station, and one nurse made a statement about the lights being creepy, and we all just tried to laugh it off. One nurse said it must have been Mr. Smith saying goodbye or maybe hello. As soon as those words left her lips, the sound of a singular call light filled the air. Most of us jumped and we all began to look around at the rooms with patients in them to see who was calling. I guess it didn't click in our minds at that time that there was no way any of the patients could have used the call light. But it being so late at night, sometimes you don't think about the details like patients being in comas. That's when I turned and looked in the opposite direction from everyone else. I was looking at the empty room of Mr. Smith. At the top of the door was a blinking light. Inside the room, the light was also on. At that moment, the unit secretary called out the room number that was flashing on her screen, and everyone else froze. Everyone slowly turned to face the empty room that was earlier occupied by Mr. Smith. "No way," one nurse said. And at that moment, the call light stopped, and the light in the former patient's room went out. We all sat there for a few minutes waiting for something more to happen, but thankfully it didn't. We worked quietly for the rest of the night, occasionally looking at the empty room, relieved to see nothing. We didn't really talk about what had happened, and we also never did anything alone that night. We went everywhere in pairs. That night was just the beginning of the scariest job I have ever had.
Spooky Street.
This next story doesn't take place in a hospital, but it is somewhat related, so I felt like I would include it. This story takes place while I was working on night shift in a mid-sized college town ambulance service. It was about 1 a.m. on a decently slow night when we get a call for an intoxicated person. This was no abnormality, as intoxication calls are decently common from the hours between midnight and about 3 a.m. The call was to a part of town that was common for intoxications, overdoses, and street violence, so the city police department also responded with us. We arrived and announced ourselves by shouting EMS, and the police officers announced themselves too as we approached the door. The house itself was decently large and 2 stories, probably like 2,500 square feet or so. The front door was open with just a screen door closed, presumably to keep bugs from filling the house. The police officers entered and then gave us a wave to go in. Upon entering the house, something just felt off. If you've been doing this job for any appreciable amount of time, you kind of get like almost a sixth sense for danger. But this didn't feel the same way. It was probably just because the tenants were new or something, but the house was incredibly barren. We had gone into the living room, and inside there was just a singular black, simple couch with a young woman sitting up saying that she had been asleep. That was it. There were no chairs, no tables, no signs of day-to-day living like books, a TV, rugs, dishes, or anything. Just that couch and the woman. From where we stood, I could see the dining room and part of the kitchen. The dining room was similar. It had a solitary dining table, no chairs, no plates, no decorations, anything.
Chloe, thanks for the
No, this wasn't a cause for concern, but it sure set a creepy mood to start out with. We assumed that the girl was the person we had been called for, but she was completely normal when we talked to her. Her brother came down the stairs when he heard the commotion and was also completely normal. While neither of them were intoxicated, we could tell that they weren't telling us the whole truth. Again, one of those
Hiro, thank you for the host as well. Thank you.
The police asked to take a look through the house, and the 2 residents give permission. We, as unarmed paramedics, have to wait until the police clear a room for us to follow them in. We had gotten through the dining room and the kitchen and were just getting ready to go upstairs when I hear a crash echo from the kitchen. I was the furthest one back in our group, and so I was closest to the kitchen. I shined my flashlight towards the sound, and I'm sure my face went white. I saw another young woman crouching down on the floor on her hands and feet. Her skin was sweaty and her eyes were wide open and looking around frantically. Her face bore an uncanny smile, and she honestly reminded me a lot of the creature Golem from Lord of the Rings. My light had illuminated the surrounding area, and I saw an open cabinet above the countertop, probably 5 or so feet off the ground, that was large enough for the small girl to have hidden in. We stared at each other for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a couple seconds, before I realized she's holding what appears to be about a 5-inch steak knife. Thankfully, I was the most junior member of the crew, so I'd been carrying our on-scene bag with me. The bag contained about 40 pounds or so of medications and tools that I threw at full force towards the girl. The steak knife got caught in the thick fabric of the bag and knocked the girl over enough for me to run past her. I'm a guy who weighs about 250 pounds, but I swear I could have outsprinted a bear. I was so hyped up. I thought that the weirdness of that call was finished after the police managed to detain her and we were allowed to treat her. But after she had gotten calmed down, she alternated back and forth between a calm, apologetic woman who just seemed exhausted and what seemed to be another entity entirely. For bouts of a few minutes at a time, She would get this huge shit-eating grin and laugh and mock us at our attempts to help her and what she had planned to do to us. While we were riding to the hospital, I distinctly remember her saying, "I was gonna put it right there," as she pointed to the right side of my chest and cackled before falling back on the stretcher. I don't think I was ever so happy to turn over care to one of the nurses. I've seen a lot of people in very horrible situations, but it's these kind of calls that still give me nightmares years afterward.
Welcome to the Discord. Thank you for joining. Fuck this shit. Hope you guys enjoy. Wait, what 5 years ago. No, wait, let me search more stuff.
Hey everyone.
Oh shit,
Before we get into the video, I'd like to thank Audible.
Wait, that was the same video. Here.
At the end of 2017, I found myself in a pretty sucky situation. My wife had been incarcerated in a federal prison for some white-collar crime she had committed a few years before we got married. She had about 4 more months left in her sentence, but I was having a pretty rough time of things out in the world without her. I got really behind on my bills. I almost lost our place several times, and I had a lot of cold nights with no electricity in the house. And even more nights of going to bed with my stomach burning from hunger. Eventually, I ended up having my car possessed, which was the worst possible thing that could have happened because of the nature of my work. I was a traveling hotel manager, and without a vehicle, I found myself out of a job as well. This was a really shitty thing, as I could no longer travel every weekend to see my wife, and I definitely couldn't put any money on her books. I felt like God was really looking out for me when I finally found a job in mid-November. The best part was that the job, which was a Holiday Inn Express hotel, was only a 30-minute walk from my house. The pay was really low and I would have to work overnight, but I got to start instantly and I was so thankful to be able to pay December's rent and to be able to send my wife a few odd dollars to help her out. I'm originally from Detroit, but I now lived in Dallas. Due to this, I felt like a pretty tough guy. The neighborhood I lived and worked in wasn't the best area, but it was nothing compared to where I was from, so I always kind of felt safe. My first couple months at the hotel were okay, but in hindsight, there was so much crazy activity I should have known to get out. I spent
Thanks
my
for
nights
the follow.
chasing
Thank you.
pimps,
Bashu, good morning, Maddie. Good morning.
an assortment of weirdos.
Even though it's
There had been a
11:24
couple of
here.
robberies in the area,
PM.
but I figured crap happens everywhere and that I would be fine. Other than that, I checked in a few people during the earlier half of my shift and watched Netflix and YouTube to get through the later half. On my shift, I was pretty much alone other than a night security guard who I'll refer to as Frank. Frank was in his 60s, was unarmed, and only worked about 3 nights out of the week. I always felt that if something crazy happened, it would be me having to provide security for him. I didn't mind though. Frank was one of those good-natured people that you couldn't help but love. I had been at the hotel for about 4 months when things got weird. My walk to the hotel included going through my rather rough neighborhood, a quiet residential cul-de-sac, and finally a small space of woods before I made it to the hotel. Because I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I usually left home around 10 so I wouldn't be late. On this particular night, something weird happened. I was a bit early leaving the house, which was cool, but it gave me time to stop at a small convenience store along the way to grab a beer. Outside of the convenience store, under the dimly lit light, stood a man staring off into the darkness. The area was full of all kinds of freaks, so this didn't immediately startle me. The man was
Eddie
big,
gotta look for a
though,
bit. I'm sorry, I
at
stopped at work
least
today.
6'3"
Okay,
and
Chloe,
built like a
okay,
grizzly
come
bear.
back. Come
He
back
was a
there.
black man who looked to be in his late 20s, not too much different from myself. He was wearing a huge patchy coat that looked as though it had been through a few decades. He had an empty, hollow look in his eyes. I knew instantly that this man was not okay. I can't explain the look in his bloodshot eyes, but I'll never forget it. It sent literal shivers down my spine. After I made my purchases and exited the store, I noticed the man was still standing in the same place, still staring blankly off into the distance. I quickly jogged past him and continued on my way. My heart jumped as I heard the man's footsteps behind me. Now, I'm not a big guy by any means, but I am pretty strong. I could definitely defend myself, but this guy was off. I wanted nothing to do with him. As I continued across the street and towards the woods, I took off. I knew this guy was too big to be able to catch me running. I wasn't even sure that he was after me, but I was not going to take any chances. I outsped the man and made it to work safely. As I began my shift, I locked all the doors of the hotel, as was necessary, and sparked up a conversation with Frank, forgetting all about the creepy guy from earlier. At our hotel, we locked the doors at night, and anyone who didn't have a room key had to be manually let in by myself or Frank. Frank left the front desk to do his rounds, and I ended up in the back office drinking my beer as I watched the hotel security monitors and played a game on my phone. My stomach turned over on itself when I noticed on the screen the big guy I had seen earlier standing at the front door of the hotel. He had followed me here. He was standing as still as a statue just like outside the store, staring into the hotel through the glass electric doors. I was pissed. I walked out to the front desk and told the man to leave now or I was going to call the cops. The man didn't move. I knew this guy was trouble and I had to get rid of him before a guest or Frank came from outside and ran into him at the door. I picked up the phone at the front desk to call the police, but when I looked back up, the man was gone. This did not make me feel relieved. I knew he was still out there somewhere, just waiting. The 911 operator assured me that someone would be there soon. I headed back into the office to wait for the cops when I heard gunshots. 3 distinct gunshots. I instantly hit the floor in the office. I frantically scanned the security monitors, but I didn't see anything. I crawled out of the office on my hands and knees, being sure not to be seen as I left the front desk and entered the hall. I nearly shit bricks as I ran into a man while I was escaping the front desk. He was just a guest, though. A guy in his late 20s that I had just checked in earlier. The guy was visibly shaken and he was so pale I thought he was dead. Dude, there's a dead body inside. He whispered. My gut wrenched and I thought I was going to puke beer everywhere. Another shot rang out and me and the man both jumped.
No, that voice, no.
The man and I went back down the hallway towards his room. Both of us crouched down. I was terrified.
Wait, really?
I knew going outside wasn't an option, so I decided we would hide in the bathroom of his room and call the cops. His room was a straight shot down the hall, but in order to get there we would have to pass the glass doors of the front entrance. As we did, I saw something that still haunts my dreams to this day. The same huge, weird man was standing directly at the door. His patchy, tattered coat covered in blood down the front of it. He had a sick, twisted look on his face. His eyes were still empty and dead. And in his right hand was a gun. The guy and I hauled ass to his room. As we were at the door to the room, another gunshot rang out, and I could hear the glass from the front door shatter. All I could think about was my mom and my wife. They would never get over me being murdered at a hotel, shot to death by this man. I knew this guy was going to kill us and whoever else he could. The guest and I ran in his room and started barricading ourselves in. I called the cops, but I was freaking out so bad I had to give the phone to the guy to talk to 911. It felt like hours went by, but finally I saw the flashing red and blue lights pull up outside. I have been unfairly harassed by police in the past, and so I'm not too big on cops, but I was so grateful to see them that night. The guy and I peeked out the window, and that's when my heart broke.
It feels like
Frank was the dead body outside the window. He lay still, bleeding out.
Thank you so much
eyes
for
wide open.
the support tonight. Oh my gosh.
I've done tons of jobs in my life, and working in a hospice, I had seen plenty of dead bodies before. This was different. This was someone who was murdered. This was someone I had
I'm
just
sorry if
talked
my
to
voice
less
is
than
like
an hour
this.
ago.
Someone really
Police arrested the man
that
instantly.
inside voice. So
He didn't
I
even
am
put up a
forced to
fight.
speak like this
He truly
for
was
5
deranged.
minutes. I'm
It turns
sorry.
out that the man
I
had
wanted
been
to
hanging
greet
around the
you
area
properly,
because he
but
had been removed from the hotel earlier
I'm so
that day.
sorry.
He had had some kind of altercation with my manager and vowed to come back for revenge. The manager had failed to warn me of any of this. I thought this creep was after me, and all of this was happening due to a situation that neither myself nor Frank was involved in. The guy was never following me. He was going to kill someone at the hotel whether I was there or not. I called my boss to come relieve me of my shift or send someone, as I obviously wouldn't be finishing the night. The asshole had no compassion and said he wouldn't be coming to the hotel until his scheduled shift. I finished talking to the police and left a rather nasty resignation letter as I left the hotel completely unattended, but I didn't care. While walking out of the property, I saw Frank in a solid black body bag being put on a stretcher. I cried the whole walk home at 4 in the morning. That was a few months ago. My wife is home now and we moved out of that neighborhood. I never went back to that hotel, and I refuse to work at any hotel or even at night ever again. I still dream about that night and have developed a slight case of social anxiety since then. But I still do shed a tear over the fact that I couldn't save Frank. I know he's with God and resting in peace now. Be safe out there, guys.
Wait, so what are you guys plotting? What are you guys plotting? Guys, what are you plotting?
This story was sent to me around 2 years ago, so the ages and dates mentioned may be inaccurate now. I want to share the most heartbreaking thing I've ever experienced. In a way, I find it therapeutic and I'm hoping it could save someone else from ever making the same mistake. This is the story of how I lost my sister at the hands of an evil, so-called human being. My name is Claire and I live in Ireland. My sister Sonia has always been my best friend. 3 years ago, Sonia came over to my place excitedly telling me about a date she had with a new guy at work named Eric. I was happy for her as she had just broken up with her abusive ex-boyfriend.
Guys, you're a bunch of masochists.
I was finally starting to enjoy life as well as being an amazing mother to a little boy. So as the next few weeks passed, Sonia and Eric had gone on a few dates, but it was nothing serious at all. All seemed to be going smoothly until one night I got a call from Sonia.
Where's Panda?
When I answered the phone, she was very upset. She told me she had been out with Eric and that she went out to have a cigarette, and a few moments later he came out shouting at her, telling her she was taking too long and that she must have been flirting with other guys. He even insulted her and called her a slut. I was shocked, and understandably so was Sonia. She said he just changed into a different person for no reason. She told me she was finished with him because she had already had an abusive relationship and she wasn't going to go down that road again. I agreed that that was the right thing to do. The following day, Sonia was bombarded with text messages from Eric begging for forgiveness and another chance. She told him no way and to leave her alone because she wouldn't accept being spoken to that way. But he wouldn't stop texting her. This went on for days, and Sonia repeatedly told him to leave her alone.
What is happening?
One day, while Sonia and Eric were at work, Eric walked
5 minutes are up.
A while later, he texted me saying that he was in a hotel with a rope and going to hang himself. My sister was a very kind person, so this upset her, and she texted him back to not do it
I'm
and
back.
to get help.
Who was that?
That he shouldn't put his family through the pain of losing.
Judicious XD is still here.
She
Thanks for
also
the
called the police
follow.
because she was worried that he was gonna do it. A few hours later, he texted her back saying he couldn't do
Dead
it
voice
and
is
just
finished.
needed to
Yeah,
see
I
her.
was. Someone
She
redeemed
told
Dead
him that she
voice,
didn't
so I
want
had to
him,
do
but
it.
that he should get help.
Okay, let's
A few
focus
days
on
later,
Corpse's
Eric
voice
came back
now.
into work. Sonia told me that he kept staring over at her and that it was freaking her out. When she got home from work, Eric texted her that there was a rumor going around work that he was stalking her. She replied that she hadn't heard the rumor, but told him that he was freaking her out, always staring over at her.
Okay.
Eric's behavior had Sonia so stressed out that she wasn't able to eat or sleep. Sonia told me she was going to ask to change shifts because of how uncomfortable he made her. Over the next few days, Eric's texts became non-stop, telling Sonia that he needed to be with her and that she was cold-hearted for not being with him. She told him to just leave her alone and move on, and that it wasn't normal that he was acting this way after only a few dates. And then she blocked him from Facebook and from her phone. We both thought that that would be the end of that, but we were so wrong.
During the next 2 weeks, a guy called Shane had added Sonia on Facebook.
There's still time.
The conversation started
watch,
off as friendly, but soon became
videos.
flirty. She seemed to like Shane, and after a lot of messaging, he asked to meet up with her. Sonia had doubts about meeting up, but after a while she gave in and agreed to meet Shane in a hotel. Please don't judge my sister. She was a good person, and all adults do this stuff at some point. I know meeting at a hotel was a bad decision for her to make, but this was very out of character for her. And nothing can ever change what happened now. On the 15th of February 2014, it was Sonia's son's 3rd birthday. We were all going to a play center to have a little party for him, and Sonia was going to meet Shane later that night while her son was at a sleepover in our mother's house. The day went great and we all had fun. So that night, around 9 p.m., Sonia checked into the hotel room where she was going to be meeting Shane. He said he would arrive a little later as he had a few things to do, so Sonia just chilled in the hotel room texting me. The last text I received from her was at 11:40 p.m. The next morning at 11 a.m., my mother called me asking if I had heard from Sonia because she was supposed to collect her son, but she couldn't get a reply when she called or texted her. I tried to call her, but there was no answer. This was very unusual for Sonia because she was always in touch with us. Especially if her son was over, she would call to see how he was. Hours passed and I thought she was just asleep because she may have had a late night or maybe even a few drinks. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. My mother and I were sitting drinking tea together at around 4 p.m. when there was a knock at the door. "That must be Sonia," I said, and we answered the door. 2 policemen greeted us at the door, and immediately my stomach sank. They asked if they could come in, and of course we let them in. They told us that Sonia's body had been found dead on the hotel room floor, that she had been strangled to death. My mother and I sobbed uncontrollably. We just couldn't believe what we were hearing. My beautiful sister couldn't be dead. There was no way. We went to the hotel with the police, and to our absolute horror, it was true. Sonia was dead. The next few hours for me were just a blur. Later that night, a man handed himself into police and admitted he had killed Sonia. It was fucking Eric. There never was a Shane. It was Eric the whole time. He had set up a fake Facebook page so he could lure Sonia to the hotel and murder her. He gave my gorgeous sister a horrifically brutal death, and we soon found out that he had sexually assaulted her too.
What the fuck?
Eric sexually assaulted Sonia and then he beat her up. She
What the
tried to fight back, so he strangled her. First, he tried to do it with her phone charger, but when that wasn't working, he used his hands to strangle her. And he also shoved her top inside her mouth with such force that it broke her teeth and dislodged her retainer. This was to silence her, according to him. It took 3 years for the trial to begin. The sick bastard pleaded not guilty and claimed he was suffering from a mental illness. This made me absolutely sick. He premeditated her murder, there's no question about that. For 2 weeks, my family and I had to sit in court listening to the details of the horrific death Sonia had suffered. We were told now Sonia panicked and said, "Eric, what are you doing?" when he began to strangle her. We were told about how there were broken bones in Sonia's neck from the force Eric used while strangling her. And we got to see photos of Eric's face after he murdered her. He was covered in cuts and scratch marks from Sonia desperately trying to fight for her life. We were also told that there were severe injuries to her private parts from when he assaulted her. Hearing all of this completely broke me. But thank God Eric was found guilty of Sonia's murder. On Friday the 26th of May 2017, Eric was sentenced to life in prison for murdering my sister. I am so glad he was convicted for making my amazing sister suffer such a horrific death, and for leaving her son without a mother.
Messed up. Yeah, I agree.
I am now raising
Jesus.
Sonia's son with my own children. After Sonia was murdered, he sobbed for her every night. He didn't understand why his mother was gone, even when we told him God needed her in heaven to be an angel. He still cried constantly because he wanted her so badly. We ended up hiring a child psychologist to explain to him why he would never see his mother again. She told him that a bold man had hurt his mommy and she was safe in heaven now. After that, he was worried that the bold man would hurt him too, but we told him he was in jail now and he could never hurt anyone ever again. Sonia's son is 6 now, and I always tell him about his mother and how much she loved him. I would just like to warn everyone about the dangers of social media. Please be careful and don't meet anyone in hotels. If you're going to meet someone from social media, at least do it in a public place. This error in judgment cost Sonia her life.
To you guys as well.
She was an amazing woman and she didn't deserve the horrific death she got. Here is a photo of Sonia, taken on the day she was murdered. I just want everyone to see the beautiful woman that scumbag stole from mine and my family's lives. I've blocked out her son's face for obvious reasons. The grief I feel from losing my sister is so overwhelming. Even years later, I'm just hoping one day it gets easier to cope with the pain.
This is okay. I think this is okay now. What should we do? There's still time.
Quick update. TLDR, it's been a year. I've had
shit. There's still time. Ito. Change? The story was sad. Yeah, it was sad and like, it's like you can't properly word it. Like it's sad and like it makes you angry. By the way, I'm gonna link to the new people here. Wait, I can hear my voice. To the new people here, I'm doing horror week this week, and this is my first stream for my horror week. Art stream with like hearing scary stories and such from like I chose Corpse as the YouTuber that we listen to for this stream. Obviously for very obvious reasons. And this is my schedule. I'm gonna post it on chat. Halloween schedule in my Twitter. It's also in my Discord, but I'm gonna link it here as well. I don't usually have a weekly schedule. I just have a special schedule for Halloween. In preparation for Halloween. Okay. Let me see. Tomorrow I'll be streaming a horror game called Detention. It's an indie horror game, and I've been pretty. Wait, let me put some music. I've been pretty interested in Detention for a long time now. Because I like the art looks nice in Steam and such. I haven't seen anyone play it yet, so it's a blind playthrough. I kinda like animating sort of welcome. Yeah, it's a blind playthrough, so I think it will be fun. I got it from a bundle and I'm excited about it. That's for tomorrow. 9 p.m. GMT plus 8. An hour earlier than my stream today. Then on Wednesday, I will not be streaming on Twitch, but I will be having a Discord horror movie night. I will be streaming a horror movie that is available on Netflix only. In my Discord server. And we're gonna pick a movie on that night as well. There are a lot of recommendations, so I hope we pick. What are we watching? We haven't decided yet. I'm gonna use like a generator for it maybe, because there are a lot of movie recommendation in the recommendation channel. And I'm excited what movie we're gonna watch. And Thursday. Thursday, I'm gonna be playing the horror game called Missing Children. I have heard of this, but I don't know any review about it. Hope it's Hereditary. Hereditary is good. I watched that already, but I don't mind rewatching it. And I want people to see like Hereditary as well. But I hope it wins. Maybe it's very good. It's very nice. What else? Yeah, on Thursday, Missing Children, 9 p.m. GMT plus 8 as well. Friday, I'm gonna be playing Phasmophobia with my mods, with some of my Twitch mods. Okay. Yeah, on Twitch, 9 p.m. as well, 9 p.m. GMT plus 8. That would be fun as well. Since my mods like are so heartbreaking, I wanna relieve some stress from them a bit and play with me, or make some of them stressed because we're gonna be dealing with spookies. Saturday, I'm gonna be streaming horror game The Ghost Train. The Ghost Train. I'm excited for that as well. あと Tanuki Tosto. Thanks for the follow. Welcome. いらっしゃい。いらっしゃい。いらっしゃい。あと wait, let me try a different voice changer. What's this? Ah! What the hell? that was nice. What else? I'm gonna try the ghost one. Whoa. Wait, nothing changed. Oh, wait, nothing changed. What the What is this? It's so ugly. It's so ugly. Nah. Sounds like Abyss Mages and Genshin. I'm gonna try zombie ghost changer.
Hey everyone. What the
What the hell? Corpse? No. Max, I just joined and I got freaked out, but I love it. This needs to be redeemed. No, I don't have a voice mod pro, and this is only today's free voices, so it can't be redeemed. I don't have voice mod pro. These are like daily free voices, and it's not permanent. It switches day by day. Tiny King Cat, thanks for the following. Thank you. いらっしゃい。Yo soy Donato and Hinkin. Thanks for the follow. Haunt me, please. Haunt. Hello? Really sounds so evil. Ow. I always do that in a movie. Wait, let me find this. Wait, the lyrics.
tiptoe through the window. Why don't you notice? I failed. This is so adorable. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Finally, dollars voy a aprender inglés en este chat. I hope I said that right, but I don't know what it means. I love this stream with all of you here. It's so cute. Thank you. Thank you. Creepy songs? What's a creepy song? Wait, wait. Sounds like Epic Soul 6, Epic Soul 75. Thanks for the follow. Oh wait, I'm just doing random shit now. my art is done. Oh wait, get the monster. Oh, Vision Frog 84. Thanks for the bits. Thank you. Nice 6 GT. Thanks for the follow as well. Let's change to baby. That isn't a baby. Well, that's what it was called. The baby from Fiji. I'll do robot. Ha. Wait, it's slow. Ha. Hi, my name is Maddie. And I'm the android sent by Cyberlife. My name is Maddie, and I'm the android sent by Cyberlife. No, it's not auto-tune, and it's a effect in voice mod. I've been playing around with it since earlier. Putting the B in VTuber. Lieutenant, where are we going? We have a wait. I tried. Wait. I'm gonna do this. Maddie the Mad replacement for God. I'm just gonna do a cappella, like a short cappella, because when you do like a voice mod or add reverb to your voice, there's a delay. That's why I haven't been doing karaoke streams yet, because I'm afraid of the delay, and people might judge me because of the delay. Like, she doesn't sing on track with it. No, I'm singing properly. I swear. Who's your favorite playable character in Detroit? Connor. Oh, stretch. Okay, done. My name is Connor. I'm the android sent by Cyberlife. God damn it, Connor. God damn it. Right.
Try, one more, try. I turned off the hear myself option, so I'm sorry if this sounds horrible, but here I go. 1 a.m., eyes closed, I'm slowly falling. With the music and the atmosphere. Now and then, I feel lights fading softly all over me. And I remember last year when I was alone in my bed with all these thoughts in my head and living silently inside. It's so late in the night, my mind is drifting away. Then I dream about times I wished for a new, happier day. If a hand could reach out right now and save my life somehow, I'll face the sun again as soon as this dreary night ends. I don't know the rap yet. Don't wanna go down like this. My head's in a place that I don't miss. So ugly, so grumpy. Sleeping in the meantime, just stay comfy. Once everything's said and done, I know I'll be okay. I will overcome. I'm hoping, I'm coping, I'm here. I remember last year. When I was alone in my bed, unhappy thoughts in my head, and living silently inside. Just keeping all to myself. Wish I could be somewhere else. Back when I. Wait, I got shy. Okay, that's it. I'm done. I just wanted to sing a bit, like a small thank you for now for the 1K followers. Thank you so much. I didn't expect that. I just celebrated my 500 follows um um like recently, but I was already at 700 by that time, I think, because I celebrated a bit late. But now I'm 1K already. Thank you so much. Oh, I forgot to turn off the game effect.
I hope that sounded fine though. I turned off the hear myself option in voice mod because I hear the delay in the hear myself that it causes me to be delayed as well. Like I I I lose my tempo. Oh, it sounded very calm. Thank you. Thank you. Um, 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 yeah, it's already 11:59, and I end my stream usually at 12 a.m. So, oh, I forgot about this.
Monkiller 1213, Christian 1524. いらっしゃい。Oh, hi, Bree. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it. So here it goes now. Yes, this is my Halloween costume. I'm just a ghost. So yeah, to people that are new and are like um want to watch me as well and for my Halloween week. My schedule is in my oh wait, let me turn the reverb off.
My schedule is on my Twitter pinned post. I have a schedule for this week in preparation for Halloween. I'll be having some party blast. What the fuck? Streams. Yum, yum. So yeah, I hope you guys
can join me. It will be fun. We're gonna be doing spoopy streams, spoopy. I just subscribe on YouTube, but thank you. I don't upload that much there yet, but I do upload there. It's just recently, I've been trying to upload my 500 television VOD there, but it doesn't let me. I tried 3 times, but I just get an error. It's so annoying. Crap, I'm full of discords. What's one more discord? Make space for Maddie. Can you make space for Maddie? Can you? Can you? Please. Split it into parts. But no, I want to upload like uncut VODs. No, this flute only voice. Okay, I'm done now. Okay, thank you so much. I need to rest now. It has been a stressful day at work. Tomorrow I'll be streaming, like I said. Yeah, see you guys. See you guys tomorrow later. Later. Good night. Have a nice day and stay safe.